Welcome to VoiceOver Simplified, everybody. I am Caitlin Dawn, and here we talk about everything voiceover under the sun. And just a quick announcement before we jump into our interview for today. I have finally launched VoiceOver Brand Sites. And if you've been following me at all, it's very exciting. It's your solution for a modern, beautiful, and authentic brand and website design bundle. So check out voiceoverbrandsites.com today. Check out what we have to offer. You can also get a free 15-minute consult with me where we'll talk about your website needs. Head over to voiceoverbrandsites.com. Okay, so today we have Adam Flaherty, and he is an executive producer at Anchorline, a video production company in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And he's been a producer since the early 2000s. He's also a producer and co-host of Modern Dadhood. It's a parenting-themed podcast, and when I checked this out, I thought, that's like side podcast. A lot of people have podcasts, but you guys interview celebrities, like straight up celebrities, like John Locke from Lost and the guy Louis from Sesame Street and like SNL people. So that's really, really cool. And we're in a band in the 2000s and 2010s called the Sea Captains. You guys got some regular rotation in play at the Hollister store, and that's pretty cool. So I'm assuming your kids don't realize that you're a cool dad?
I think that, I try to impart some coolness on them as well. But no, I'm just a pretty standard dude to them.
You're just dad.
That's right.
Yeah. And you're also getting into the world of voiceover, right?
I am, yeah. It's funny how I've sort of made my way into that. I've never liked the sound of my own voice, to be honest, but having been in the video world for so long and reviewing voices in casting sessions and now having my own podcast, so building out this small studio in my finished basement, it just felt like a natural thing. You know, if I can make a little bit of extra money and, you know, use my the director sort of part of my brain and apply that to, you know, the other side of it in auditioning, it just seemed like an easy move.
Yeah, and today we're actually going to talk a lot about the audition process and kind of some ideas and tips that you have for that. Before we get into like the prepared questions, one just came to mind. Do you have a hard time turning off the director in your mind when you're getting into an audition, or are you able to put that aside and then be the performer and then edit it later and direct yourself?
I think I'm always trying to think a little bit about what the person who's listening to the auditions might be hoping for, but I do think I can do a pretty good job at turning it off and just, you know, giving it my own authentic take.
Yeah, cool. That's always an interesting, because we have to self-direct when we're in the booth, but then sometimes like when we're in the middle of an audition, we're like directing ourselves while we're talking, and you're kind of takes you out of the performance. So
totally. And I find that I've always tried to give as much context and direction as possible for a casting, but now getting into the other side of it in auditioning, most people don't. So yeah, I find that you do have to do a whole lot of self-directing.
Yeah, I love it when the only direction is like conversational, non-announcery, and it's like, that's everything now. So
that's everything. That's everything.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for voice actors when they get a casting and they prepare for an audition? Like, what kind of things should we be doing to prepare for that audition?
Well, I think there's the technical side of it, and then there's the performance side of it. So for the technical side, for somebody who's just getting into voiceover, I think it's important that you have a setup that will yield clean audio, you know, very little reverb, a little, you know, noise in the room, and just give you a good clean signal. And there's a zillion blogs and YouTube videos with recommendations on equipment for doing that. But that's sort of the technical part of it. I think that my own advice for somebody who's getting into auditioning for voiceovers from the performance side is really just to kind of be yourself and don't overthink it. It's very easy to get into your head about, you know, if I'm reading this sentence, where do I put the emphasis? Do I emphasize this word? Do they want it to kind of go up at the end, or should I be more flat, or should I bring more energy, or should I scale back? Should I include a lot of character? And the truth is, at least in my opinion, as somebody who listens to a lot of auditions, it doesn't really matter. What is unique about you is your voice. And my assumption as a director is that if you're in the ballpark, I can envision your voice in this spot that I'm casting. I want to trust that I can give you direction to get it where it needs to be. So all that to say, don't overthink it. Don't put too much stock in how you deliver it. If you deliver it in the way that is authentic to you and you feel works in the spot, based on your understanding of what it is, that's probably going to be adequate.
Yeah, definitely. And so when you're listening to a bunch of auditions, like on this note, like what does stand out to you then when you're listening to a whole bunch of auditions in a row?
So I'm also just working on the assumption that other people use these casting sites the same way that I do when I'm directing something and listening to auditions, but I'm not sure that I necessarily want somebody to really stick out. Sometimes I'll listen to the full thing, depends on how long the sample is. Sometimes I'm listening to 10 or 15 seconds and moving on to the next one, and then 15 seconds and moving on to the next one, and then revisiting, going back through the list. And sticking out among a list, a large group of auditions isn't necessarily a good thing. It sort of depends on what I'm casting for. If I need somebody who's portraying a character, then sure, I want somebody who sticks out, and immediately I can associate what I'm envisioning in my head for the character with their voice. But otherwise, again, I just want to be able to connect a voice to what I see as the finished product.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. I guess there's something that it's kind of, some casting directors say do it, some say don't. But what about the use of lead-ins in, like, say, a second take, and you're like improvising a lead-in or something like that? Does that annoy you? Does it take you out of the process? Do you like it?
I would always invite somebody to do any sort of improvisation that they want, even if they're straying from the script. I would say always, give a pass that sticks to the script. But if somebody wants to improvise after that and they feel that maybe it shows a little bit more character or demonstrates a little bit more variety in what they're able to do or what they might bring to that role, I would never ding somebody for doing that.
Interesting. Okay. When you're listening to the auditions, you said sometimes you listen to 10 to 15 seconds, sometimes you listen all the way through. What makes you skip an audition? And is that a bad thing? You said you come back to it later.
Honestly, I think the only thing that would make me, skip past somebody more quickly is if their sound quality wasn't very good. And again, like, you would hope that somebody who is signed up with one of the voiceover casting services would have a good enough setup to provide you clean audio, even if their audition doesn't demonstrate that. But from my perspective, if I have a lot of options, it's not necessarily worth the risk or even exploring further if the audition already sounds poor out of the gate. Otherwise, I'll give everybody a listen, and I think I can very quickly generally cull the list down to a much smaller number, which I know, as somebody who's now submitting auditions, like, that's pretty heartbreaking, because even if you're only spending 5 or 10 minutes on something, you're putting work and thought and consideration and emotion into it. So to think that somebody could very easily and quickly discard it is disheartening. But on the other side, I can usually pretty quickly move through the list and cull it down to maybe 5 or 10. And then from there, I'm consulting with any other sort of creative stakeholders on my team before we get it to the final number that we are going to share as recommendations to our client.
So you're starting with, what's the number? What number are you usually starting with? And then you're whittling it down to 10, 15?
Great question. And it really depends on the project. So if I have a week to cast, I might, leave it open for up to 50 or more submissions. If I have only a couple of days to cast, I might just say, I try to keep it to 20 or 25. Sometimes we have castings that really we only have about 24 hours to collect auditions, and we might only get 15 of them. And generally I can still find somebody who is a good fit from there, but naturally the more submissions that you have, the larger sort of pool of talent, and it take me a bit longer to kind of narrow that down to ones that I could see potentially working.
Right. Yeah, so do you ever pick a voice that's like your favorite that you recommend, and then the client picks somebody like totally not what you thought or something like that?
That's a great question. And something similar happened recently, not quite to that degree, but generally we're only putting forward to the client voices that we already feel could be a great fit.
Right.
And typically, like, I'll try to get it down to maybe 3 to 5 options, and I'll say, but here's 5 voices that I think could work really well for this. And I have a couple, maybe 1 or 2 that rise to the top from me, but I'd really love to hear your thoughts before sharing that with you. And a lot of times you do find that, those 1 or 2 names that I thought are the strongest of these 5 already align with their opinion, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And I did have a recent project where it was a pretty fast turn casting. We didn't have that many submissions only because the casting window was open for such a short time. And we presented 2 options to the client. And really only one of them to me was the best, strongest, most viable option. But I really wanted to give them a second option to hear as well. So we kind of selected the next strongest and shared both of them. And the client, there were several people on the client side who were there for the presentation. We listened to them together, and they all kind of unanimously agreed, like, these are both great, but this one is our favorite. And the one that was their favorite was the one that was, kind of the straggler for me. And we ultimately worked with that person, and they were great, and the spot came out awesome, and I have no regrets whatsoever. But it's just one of those funny circumstances where I felt like there was a clear winner, a clear voice that, matched my vision for this commercial, and the client really wanted to go in a different direction.
Say you're the voice actor, you've booked the job, and now you're going into the live direct. You don't necessarily know what the direction will be. They picked you, but say you gave them 3 different reads, like, what's the style? What are they going to throw at me? So what is your advice to talent going into a live directed session, and how should they prepare for that?
I think for somebody who is less experienced, is fairly new to voiceover, maybe hasn't done a live directed session or has only done a few, I would say go in with confidence. Be open and flexible to take direction and try anything that they would like to hear, but go in with confidence. And rather than waiting for somebody to play the game of, well, should I do a whole pass of this, or do you want to go line by line? Go in and say, here's how I would love to do this. Let me give you a whole pass of this, and then, make notes, and then we'll go back and revise as much as you'd like, but sort of go in with a plan for how you like to do things, how you prefer to do things. Even if you don't care, maybe just make a decision, and just to kind of keep things on track, let them know that you do know what you're doing. You have done this before. It's not your first rodeo, and don't be afraid to have fun with it. Like, for me, as corny as it sounds, the thing that I've loved the most about my career in video production is the people that I've met, and having access to all these different types of businesses and places that otherwise I would have no business going, or things that I would have no opportunity to learn about. And then asking people, interviewing people, asking them the sort of layman's, questions about what they do. It's the learning and the relationship building. So I think for me, whether I'm interviewing somebody on set or whether I'm working with somebody in a live directed voiceover recording, I like to have fun with it, really get to know their personality a little bit. And to me, you can kind of hear that, you can feel that in the end result. And it just makes for a better, more positive, more fun experience, and builds relationships that you can leverage down the road, whether it's for hiring them again directly without needing to cast for a project, or even if it's just opening the doors to new relationships with other people. So I'm a big proponent for networking and building relationships and having fun.
And I find like for people who are new and say it's like their first live directed session, just try to go in with, yeah, I really like that. Go through and like, yeah, I'm going to do a full read, or like try to be decisive in the session and then flexible. And the people that are in the session want you to succeed, and they're on your side, and like they're team you. So try to just relax. But
that's great advice.
Yeah. And like talking to the nerves, and like the first time I did a live direct session, I felt like an imposter, but I was like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to be just confident. They picked me. So like, do you have any advice for like the first timers?
Maybe don't get discouraged. So for me, when I'm directing somebody, I'm reading it in my head before we even get into the session. I kind of have a feel for not only the tone, but again, what types of things I want to have emphasized, where I'd like to have some natural beats kind of built in. And if somebody doesn't hit on those things, I'll make a note and we'll circle back and we'll try it again. And there are times when somebody just can't seem to, I shouldn't say somebody can't seem to catch on, because I feel like it's a fault of mine to not be able to properly explain my vision to them, but we just can't really get exactly on the same page. And that can be, I feel like that can be very discouraging for both parties. But, to your point, the client or the director, they are on your team. They want this to be successful. And so even, as much as I hate to do the like parroting thing and say, can you read it this way? And I read the line and then have them parrot it back to me. If it comes to that, even then, don't feel like you have failed at something. It's really just, we're 95% of the way there, but I need this one final piece, to use in my edit, and maybe you use it or maybe you don't.
Yeah, for sure. And I've never had a director be like in, I don't know, like in a bad mood or like mean or anything. Like,
sure.
I feel like those sessions are fun. Like, they're kind of out of the normal thing that you do every day, and everyone's having a good time, typically in my experience, and it's like the fun thing, So
right.
I guess the last question I have is, can you speak to maybe current trends that you see happening right now in the specs that you're writing, in the voiceovers that you're booking and stuff like that?
Here's a trend that you and I have chatted about separate from this conversation that is disappointing to me. So whether it's casting for an actor to be in a commercial or casting for a voice to appear in a commercial, we have always offered, rates that I feel are industry standard and are very fair, even, more than fair to actors. And, it's because I want to see people get paid what they're worth. It's because I want somebody to be excited the next time I reach out to them and want to work with my company. And getting into the voiceover side of it, even just as sort of, I hate the phrase side hustle, but even just as this thing that I'm exploring sort of separate or parallel to my business, I'm definitely finding that at least the auditions or the castings that I'm receiving are very low pay. Like, people are expecting you to read 3 to 5 minutes of content, and they want to pay $75. It's like insulting. And so that's a disappointing trend that I'm hoping turns around. And I'm not saying that's the case across the board. I know that these casting services have algorithms that are serving different people different casting options. And probably somebody who's new to those services on the acting side is getting much different castings than somebody who's been doing it for a long time, has a lot of ratings and reviews and relationships and a large body of work. So this isn't a complaint. I just am a big advocate for paying actors, paying artists, paying creators, paying musicians what they are worth. So hopefully that it's not actually a trend. Hopefully it's just something that's based on my new experience as a voice actor. But I want to see that people are being paid fairly.
Yeah. And for those that are new and maybe don't know about this resource, check out the GVAA rate guide. And that's become the industry standard for non-union voice talent. And like you get this newcomers thing where you're like, well, I'm new. I shouldn't charge industry standard, but you should. If you have your training and you have demos and you've got a good audio setup, there's no reason why you shouldn't be, you know, setting the standard for yourself. Because if we hold the boat together, you know, we're all in this boat together and we need to keep it from sinking. So I don't accept a rate lower than a certain minimum. And if we all have that, then nobody will put out jobs for such a crap pay because everyone will just be like, no, we need to be paid what we're worth. So I encourage you to check that out and use that as a resource. And these online casting sites are great, but just, you know, only audition for what you think it's paying you fairly for your time. So.
And that can be hard, especially when you think, oh, I'd really love to have this brand on my reel. I'd love to be able to say that I've worked with this company. But if that company or the agency that's working with that company is offering embarrassingly low rates and it's not worth it to you, and it's going to hurt other people in your industry by accepting rates that are that low, I feel like it's important to kind of stand your ground on that.
Yeah. Well, this flew by. Thank you so much for joining us today and for all your insights. I hope it's really helpful for people. I think it will be.
I hope so. Thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, it's been great chatting with you. I love your YouTube channel.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for watching. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button if you enjoy the interview process I've been doing and if you want to see more interviews and videos like this. And we'll catch you next time on VoiceOver Simplified. Bye.